gonna crawl under this rusty behemoth and change that oil. That's a little bit overdue for me. About 2,800 kilometers further than I normally push it, but I usually run synthetic and synthetic oil filters, and I'm also changing it at a 5,000 kilometer interval, so I think I'm in the clear still. Sometimes you just get busy and you don't have an opportunity to catch up. If you guys are looking around the barn, you'll notice I actually have room for things. It's nice and clean in there. Well, as clean as a barn's going to get. And further, if you check it out, the lawnmower's got a new set of tires on it that doesn't go flat anymore. The snow blower's been installed and it's ready for winter now. We've made a little bit of progress out there. I've been busy. I've also got the Chevette stowed away in there for the winter. This car is super oily underneath. It's self-lubricating, so that means it's going to last forever, right? Yeah, I'm sure it will. So the other day I installed the snow blower on the Deere, but before doing so it needed a little bit of regular maintenance. The original battery that was in it had since died. It doesn't seem to want to hold a charge, but I am looking into that to see what's going on. So what I did, I managed to install a significantly larger battery under the hood. I had this one given to me by my brother as he no longer needed it. So for me, I was able to remove the existing battery tray that held the smaller lawn and garden style battery. You can see the original battery tray here. It actually fit inside of the front housing of the lawnmower, and then the smaller battery would fit in the footprint. Rather than cutting this up, I decided it would be easier, maybe smarter, to make my own. So I had some 2-inch angle iron left over, and I basically bolted a piece across the front, which the front portion of the battery rests on. And then I made 2 pieces that proceed to go to the back of the housing, one on either side of the battery, and I welded everything together. So the battery drops into its tray. I had an old piece of strap that I used to secure the battery in place. I did have to make one new ground terminal for the battery because the old one wasn't quite long enough to reach. So I made a new one. I used the same grounding point on the chassis as the original. Over on the positive side of the battery, I had to relocate the solenoid. The original one was mounted to the battery tray, so I found a spot on the housing that it could be permanently mounted. I used the existing wiring, and I didn't have to modify anything further. It was a nice little project, where at the same time I had this thing apart, I also replaced the fuel filter, I changed the engine oil, I changed the oil filter, I changed the air filter. I changed the spark plugs, and I ran some seafoam through the carburetor using the intake, and I also put some seafoam in the fuel. So if you see blue smoke when it's running, or more white smoke, I suppose, that's what's currently causing that. It fires up quite a bit easier than it had before. I had quite significant crank times before the tune-up, but that's pretty typical. Usually that's what ends up happening when I let it sit for so long. It takes a little while for it to actually get started again. But here I'm putting the tire chains on the lawnmower. It's getting to be that time of year where I'm going to have all the tire chains ready to go. We're getting a little bit of snow today, but I don't think I'll be using the snowblower anytime soon. I've found that securing the tire chains with zip ties prevents them from popping off if they get loose on the wheel. I try to bang and shake the tire chain before I'm finished installing it to make sure that it is tight, but sometimes they manage to slip one way or another and get loose. And then once they get loose and fall off, if you're stuck in the middle of the driveway buried halfway in snow, it can be difficult to try to reinstall a tire chain on the fly. One thing I've learned is when you're installing the tire chains, make sure that all the sharp pointed portions of the tire chain are facing outward. Imagine that tire not wanting anything sharp against it. It's a pretty logical way to think. And I always keep a few extra zip ties on board of the lawnmower, because you never know when you're going to need one if one pops free. Plus they're super handy to have just about anywhere. The next modification for the John Deere is probably going to be some auxiliary lighting. The headlights themselves don't work right now. I had a bit of an incident with the power wire that supplies those lights. It got hung up somewhere and broke. Not a big deal, and I could easily fix it, except those headlights don't do much of anything, especially with the snowblower in the way. So my plan is to get some additional lighting, install it permanently on the snowblower. That may consist of some kind of an LED floodlight, or maybe like a light bar type of product, as well as on the Deere, install some form of headlight in place of what's there. Maybe I'll remove the existing grill because it's broken anyways, and put a light in that area. And it would also be nice to have some type of floodlight on the rear of the lawnmower that I can use when I'm pulling the trailers in and out of the barn at night. A lot of times I'll use one of the utility trailers to transport firewood to and from the pit, so having the light on the back of it would come in handy for me. And installing a couple of extra switches on the lawnmower is nothing that I'm unfamiliar with. It'd be very straightforward to do. If that's something you guys might be interested in seeing me do, leave a comment and let me know if that's something that you're looking forward to, or if you've got a question about my lawnmower and the things that I've done to it, including the K66 transaxle upgrade. I've got brand new tires on the back of it now. My old ones were really dry rotted. And then now with my new battery tray, with a full-size battery under the hood, it only has 460 hours on it. But the old transaxle, if you'll remember back to those videos, completely self-detonated. So it needed to be replaced or repaired, and replacing it, in my opinion, was the far better choice, because it made this machine much more capable than what it used to be. And maybe later on in the winter or early in the spring, I'm going to have to do some maintenance again on the cutting deck. It's starting to rust through in a few places, so I need to weld some patches. I think the drive belt needs to be replaced for the cutting deck. The blades have been around for a few seasons and probably need to be replaced. And of course the paint is leaving a lot to be desired, so I should certainly pay some attention to that in the near future. because I'm going to regret it later when it's no longer working and I need it to work. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate the views, the likes, and the comments. And if you've noticed, I try to answer back to every comment that's made. That's a personal goal that I have on my channel, is to make everybody feel like their voice is heard. So if you feel like leaving a comment or even a concern telling me that maybe my oil changing ramps are too questionable to trust, so I shouldn't be laying under the car, you know, your opinion of course, you can certainly feel free to leave that below the video, and I'll respond and get back to you. Thanks again everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.